Ladies and gentlemen, a review for a band that you just think they're okay, but Andy, he can't say a bad thing about them. The Swans.
Hi everyone, Bethany Teeth Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Swans record, The Glowing Man. This is the latest full-length album from legendary experimental rock band Swans, billed as the final album the band is going to release in this current incarnation of the band. Not so sure what that means, but Michael Gira and company have clearly put a bit of a marker here, saying the band is going to consciously move forward and evolve in some kind of significant way with future releases. But in a way, this is nothing all that new, because Swans has always been in a state of evolution from the start to this point of their career. You may remember back in 2010 when they made their comeback from being dead and came back with an entirely different sound. One that was similar to Michael Gira's Angels of Light side project, but it would be on their next record, The Seer, that they would kick off the sound that they had been exploring for their past three records. The last time Swans dropped a final studio album, it was about 20 years ago with the record Soundtracks for the Blind. It would be a couple years later that they would drop the live album Swans Are Dead. And in my opinion, the new material the band has been dropping since they reconvened has really given a lot of this older stuff in their discography new context, because the band's progression from really primordial and abrasive noise rock in the early 80s to the really developed and hypnotic and sort of progressive experimental rock music that they're making now, it's intriguing. Plus, all of the sounds the band has dabbled in and pushed the envelope with, and all the sounds the band has developed over the years on records like The Great Annihilator and Soundtracks for the Blind, their goth rock records, their dark folk and neo-folk output, some of the solo material and side project material that Michael Gira put out while Swans was dead for the first time. And now with this latest trio of albums, which is ending with The Glowing Man, we're getting these gargantuan opuses where Swan's entire canon of musical styles kind of culminates. And all of these things are packed into monstrous song lengths, monstrous album lengths, complemented with dense layers of instrumentation, very vibrant production. The songs are performed with these really tense and patient progressions, all of these ethereal intros and interludes that develop into these hypnotic grooves and explosive walls of instrumentation, of guitars and drums and background vocals and horns and keys and bells. And really that's just the band's past couple of records, and The Glowing Man over here checks a lot of the same boxes that To Be Kind did. So there are no huge surprises on this record in my opinion, but some very notable and important changes. I would actually say this album is more meditative than The Seer and To Be Kind. The band is really trying to hit listeners with these repetitions that we've heard over the last couple of albums in a different way, in a way that's simultaneously relaxing but also unsettling. Case in point, the song Cloud of Unknowing, where Michael Gira's vocals as well as the background vocals come together into what seems almost like a call to prayer or some kind of religious chant. The instrumentation on this record comes together in a way where it feels like I'm listening to a very panoramic mix, like I'm surrounded by the musicians on this record. I'm really enveloped in the music. Not a sensation I felt quite as much on To Be Kind. That album to me was just very straightforward, it was throttling, it was crushing. The Glowing Man is a little bit more about subtlety, especially the little sonic and musical nuances that are hidden in these interludes and these drones that the band seems to harp on for much longer than they were on their last album. The Glowing Man doesn't really lend itself to casual listening, even less so than Swan's past couple of records, even though those were both 2 hours each as well. By comparison, To Be Kind is a little bit more of a barn burner, especially with blood-pumping cuts like Oxygen as well as A Little God in My Hands. The Glowing Man feels like a cohesive 2-hour experience more than it does just a grouping of songs. A multi-phase spirit journey, if you will. Even the loudest, heaviest build on this record, which is like in the first half of the title track, doesn't so much feel like I'm being beaten down or whipped up into an aggressive frenzy. It's more like I'm being lifted up into the God realm. Believe me, it's not clouds and angels plucking harps. Instead, it's chaos. It's total meltdown. It's pushing the boundaries of human something beyond its limits. And I say something because there is certainly an experience about this album, in my opinion, that's difficult to put into words. But when I do sit down and I listen to this record, I do feel like I'm being pushed past my breaking point. And this feeling only intensified in the second half of the title track here as Swans whipped out this heavy guitar riff that had kind of a krautrock-ish groove to it, and the more and more they rode this groove, the tenser and tenser the instrumental got. Now after this track, we have the closing song, which is logically titled Peace at Last. It's a bit of a calm after the storm, and this track is one of many shorter songs in the track listing that serve as really good tuneful breathers in between these lengthy monsters. In that respect, this album reminds me quite a bit of The Seer. There were a lot of those shorter tracks to guide us from one long cut to another, and these shorter cuts also bring some nice diversity to the record as well, like on the song People Like Us, which had a very dramatic kind of country and western vibe to it, especially with the slowly strummed guitars, Michael Gira's very theatrical delivery, the incredibly apocalyptic lyrics in this track that were unsettling, kind of morbid as well, and the arranged instrumentation on the track was gorgeous. These tracks really help out the flow of the record. To Be Kind, by comparison, felt a little bit more like a trial with each track because every song was just almost a challenge to be faced, which scratched its own sort of cerebral itch. The Glowing Man, a slightly different one. Another thing I like about this album is that the longest cuts on here, I think they flow really logically, so much so that the momentum that is ramped up at the beginning of the track is carried fluidly from one passage to the next, like with the epic and heavy riffs and the tubular bells and the grand chorus vocals on The Cloud of Unknowing in the second half, which flowed really nicely into the spacey interlude right after, which almost felt, I don't know, freely improv in a sense to me. It's like during these droney passages, the band is in a certain key, and everybody's kind of just gently contributing to this atmosphere of instrumentation. And there's so many layers to these interludes. Even though there's not the strongest sense of direction during these passages, as a listener, I can just kind of float within these spots and find a lot of beauty and find a lot of interesting things to hear. Another thing I like about the progressions on this record is that they're not as telegraphed as they were on To Be Kind, and I think that's again because the band isn't trying to throttle you and hit you with all these straightforward, aggressive, obvious movements. Instead, you may have several pieces of instrumentation changing or embellishing at one time, so which one is kind of guiding things, you're not really so sure. But no matter what direction it's going in at any given time, it's all very cohesive. It's not like a total mess and nobody's really paying attention to anybody else, or that there's no sense of composition on these tracks. There certainly is. Now here I'd like to highlight that even though there are things that I think this album does better than To Be Kind, it's only because this album is trying to go for a different experience than To Be Kind. To Be Kind to me was a punchier record, it was a heavier record, it was a more immediate record. There were a lot of insane and exciting vocal performances from Michael Gira all over this album as well. The Glowing Man, I think Michael plays it a little more low-key. The performances and the instrumentation on The Glowing Man aren't as consistently aggressive or hard-hitting, but the trade-off is that you're hearing music that is more intoxicating, more entrancing. And keeping you locked into these repetitions and into these spacey passages means delivering instrumentals that are a little more elaborate. Case in point, the building wall of instrumentation on the song Frankie M in the first half, which had me at near eargasm, or on the song The World Looks Red, The World Looks Black, which at one point features these wonderful jangly guitars, jazzy flutes, some light percussion, and these "bear in my mind" mantras being repeated again and again and again. It's moments like this that just kind of lock my brain into a deep trance. And this trance is intensified as this head crushing, just not even like a full riff, just one single note, and some drums kind of pop in and set the pace for these really hot horns and kind of zany background vocals. Follow to rip a man, follow to make a man. The intro track, The Cloud of Forgetting, is a decent cut. I like the instrumental, I like the mix on this track. It sounds very pretty. Not one of the most engaging moments in the track listing here, but I think it sets the spacey and psychedelic tone of the album itself, so makes sense. And I've pretty much mentioned all of the songs in the track listing at this point, with the exception of When Will I Return, which is another sort of breather cut, but still a very chilling ballad featuring vocals from Michael Gira's wife, Jennifer Gira. The lyrics are pretty eye-widening and dark. From what I understand, they detail an experience she had being sexually assaulted. And then as the instrumental develops into these twiddling guitars and some twisted, sinister, psychedelic keyboards, the track only gets better. In terms of songs, there's not really much else to mention. The 2-hour runtime of this project is broken down into just 8 tracks. But again, this album isn't really about songs or about what any single song does. You know, it feels like a pretty cohesive 2-hour experience, to be honest, even though as I dive into the lyrics, there doesn't seem to be one single thread or concept that pulls the entire album together. I think sonically and musically there are most definitely a lot of common threads, but it seems like there's a different experience and a different emotion kind of fueling each single track. Of course, given that it's Swans, there are tracks on here that deal with God and religion and spirituality, as well as death and existence and mortality. And I guess these songs, even though they're fueled by very specific experiences and ideas, still point in those directions, like on the somewhat abstract and very poetic People Like Us, and on the song Frankie M as well, where Gira seems to be singing about somebody who is trying to reach some sort of higher plane or something through drug use, and there's a moment where he's singing about, you know, butterfly, butterfly, but then all of a sudden the glass breaks, he's stabbed in the eye, all of a sudden this moment that he was having in the sun is crashing down and he's dying. And even though there are things in the music that to me read to me as being very spiritual and very otherworldly, still Swans is a group who I've never thought to take religion or spirituality all that seriously. You know, that they've taken kind of a cynical tone when it's come to spirituality and religion, in my opinion. Either that, or when they sort of embrace these themes, they come at it at a very dark-sided angle. The closing track on here, case in point, a few lyrics that stuck out to me about all creation being hollow and the mind being as useless as a knife in a lake or an arrow in space. I think this is a pretty great swan song to this era in the band's career. I don't know if we're going to see a big break before we see another Swans record, how long it's going to take the band to restructure into something different. But I just gotta say that not only is The Glowing Man, To Be Kind, and The Seer I think one of the best trilogies in rock music, but this is a fantastic ending to it. And just to think about these 3 albums coming together, the feat that Swans have essentially achieved here, coming together with 3 records back to back, all great, each of them 2 hours each, and in an age where most rock bands can't help but look back into the past and pull so blatantly from it, Swans have continued moving forward and have dropped one incredibly ambitious project after another that pushes the limitations of rock music. And I'm looking forward to seeing them continue to do that with whatever Swans or Swans-related material drops in the hopefully near future. So if you're looking for something that's very mind-altering, heavy, cerebral, vast, and very dynamic, this is your record. You know, it's a little time consuming, but the experience I had with this record, for me, very fulfilling. No big complaints about this album, other than, you know, maybe it was a little too similar to its two predecessors in some respects. I occasionally did get a little hint of deja vu, but some of that is surely intentional, because the more I listen to this album, the more it feels like it's so deeply connected to the two previous Swans records. And once I familiarize myself with this record, I'm looking forward to going back and sort of revisiting To Be Kind and The Seer in depth as well, to sort of get a full gauge of what exactly these three albums are trying to do. I'm feeling a decent to strong 9 on this LP. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best. You're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe. Please don't cry if you happen to strongly disagree with my point of view on this Swans album. Anthony Fantano, forever.